Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of some books I'm not sure would make the greatest adaptations. I recently did a video, kind of an updated list of books that I think would make fantastic adaptations, and these ones, I don't know what I'm talking about, right? I'm not an expert when it comes to what's gonna work and what's not gonna work when it comes to movies and TV shows and video games. I just feel like maybe these books as books are already in their best format, but I guess you could say as a disclaimer, I would absolutely watch any of these in any form of an adaptation, so I just want to make that clear. I'm sure people who know what they're doing could make great adaptations out of all of these. And I'm going to start with one that's already in the works. It's happening. I would never have picked this to be an adaptation, but to kick off the list, sorry Wheel of Time fans, I don't feel like Wheel of Time was the best fantasy story to pick to make an adaptation of. I'm sure that it's going to be fantastic. I'm absolutely going to watch it. But there's just so many things about what I think would make a great adaptation that this kind of goes against. So first off, it's 14 books long. 15 if you count the prequel. Already, I feel like that's a strike against what I usually think is going to work. When something is that long, I find that you're just going to have to cut things that a lot of fans consider really important. You might even have to cut entire characters, or you'll have to combine characters, and I'm sure it's going to work, and they're going to make it work, and it's going to be great. But as a person who cares about the integrity of the adaptation, if you will, I think I would be a little bummed to know they're gonna have to cut some stuff, but they have to. There's no way a TV show is going to be able to make that happen. Another thing is the amount of time that passes over the series. If you want to adapt the story well and you want to dedicate a season to a certain amount of books, I just think at some point the actors are going to age beyond maybe where they were supposed to in the books. There's also so many characters. I just am not sure. Like I said, I'm sure the adaptation is going to be great. I'm absolutely going to watch that show, but would not have been my first pick. If you're still here and you haven't clicked away, the next three I'm going to lump together because for similar reasons, I think that these wouldn't make for the most entertaining of adaptations. They could be done in a way that's very emotionally gripping, but ultimately I just think there's other fantasy stories that would be more entertaining on the big screen or in a video game fashion, and that would be The Thief, Age of Assassins, and then Assassin's Apprentice. The thing that kind of combines all of these in my mind, they're all very different, they all have very different tones, but there's something that's similar between them all, and that's they're very much coming-of-age stories. Coming-of-age stories can be fantastic because you're following a character for a long time. It definitely makes you feel very connected to this character, but at the same time, we've seen this done a lot of different times, and I feel like part of why this works so well in book format is because you're able to stay with the character, you know their thoughts, and the emotions are there because it's so much about what they're experiencing, and you don't always get that when you're watching a TV show, and so, or a movie, right? And in a video game, I feel like we're not often drawn to video games because of how the character feels inside. So what makes these books great books is that we have these emotional connections with these characters, and we see these characters growing and developing and changing, and I just not sure that these three stories would be the best. I, of course, welcome disagreeing opinions, so feel free to express why you think any of these would make fantastic adaptations. But the next one, I feel like a lot of people are definitely going to disagree with me on. I think that the visuals would be great for this, but beyond that, I just would rather it stay a book series, and that would be the Cruel Prince Trilogy by Holly Black. So this is a Fae story, and the descriptions of the way in which the Fae world looks, the way they do their hair, their outfits, I would love to see all of that done. I think fantastic makeup artists and costume designers and special effects teams could make that really beautiful, but that's kind of where the potential for it to be a great adaptation ends for me, because at its core, it's a girl who's trying to be sneaky and outwit the Fae. She is a mortal, she's human. The way I said that made it sound like immortal. She's a mortal person, she's a human being, and the Fae bully her. And then there's this kind of will they, won't they aspect in the story that I just think we've gotten quite a few of those types of stories in media, this like, is this really healthy type of relationships? And I'm not judging anybody who enjoys stories that have that. I think it's fiction And I think there's a difference between this is entertaining, the same way violence can be very entertaining, but you're not for violence. But either way, because this is, I don't know, I just think that there's, the politics of the story make it really fun to see how the character is maneuvering through all this. But I don't know if it would be all that entertaining in a show, and I think the show would have to up the romantic aspects of it, but I wouldn't want them to. I don't know. So let me know if you disagree with me on this. I would love to see your reasons why I think this can stay a Fae story in book format. Sticking with Fae, I'm really sorry. I don't care about the Agatar adaptation. I might watch it. I'm pretty sure it's in the works, but I DNF'd the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas because I'm not opposed to reading a story that's mainly about the romance, but I didn't care about the romance in this series. And on top of that, there were times where I'd be reading it and I'm like, what are we even doing right now? What's going on? And I'm not what's going on because it's so dense like Malazan or something, but I just genuinely am like, what am I supposed to care about right now as far as outside of the romance goes? Because they would act like, oh, it's dire, we need to take care of this. And I'm like, I feel like we're only just now hearing about this, though. This is more of just so that there is something in between the characters being hot and pining for each other, which that's fine. And I think in book format, it kind of works because you're reading and you're like, will they, won't they? And I suppose people, don't get tired of watching hot people pine for each other, but I just feel like there's other adaptations that I might like more for different reasons. I mentioned Malazan a second ago. I'm not sure Malazan would make the best adaptation. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but this story spans lots of time, lots of characters, and I'm not super well versed, and I'm not going to pretend like I am. I only read the first 2 books, but even within those 2 books, I feel like a TV show just wouldn't be able to do this story justice. I don't think movies definitely wouldn't be able to do this justice either. The things that I feel like so many of the fans appreciate is how large in scope it is, and these themes that have so much time has to transpire to show the effects of things, and I'm just not sure that would really work. I feel like you would lose that emotional connection that so many of us crave when we're watching a show. We want to see these actors bring these characters to life, and I'm just not sure that would really work. Plus, I kind of feel like the story is purposefully dense at times to sort of keep you in the dark. So characters will have conversations, and they'll go to name someone, but then they won't actually name them. And then so you're left thinking like, wait, who are they talking about? And in a TV show, that aspect would kind of be ruined because you could just see people. Unless you did a dramatic, like, I know who did this, and another character's like, who? And then you just went to the next scene. And that would be cheesy and annoying, and I feel like people wouldn't like that. So I just think there's all sorts of reasons. Plus, it's 10 books long, and that's a lot of books. Like, Storm My Archive, I mentioned in my other video, could make a fantastic adaptation, but it's broken up into 5 book arcs. So if it were a full 10, I would question if Stormlight would be good in an adaptation also. And because this one is 10, plus there's other books off to the side, I'm just not sure this one would be the best. Next up, we have Black Prism and Foundry Side. The main reasons that I'm not sure that these would make the best adaptations has to do with the emphasis of the magic systems in both of these stories. Magic can be a very difficult thing to make look good in an adaptation. Sometimes it can look fantastic, and sometimes if it's a video game, it can be really fun because video games, especially RPGs, have a magic user in them. So I could see these maybe working in a video game, and in my list of ones that I thought could be great adaptations, I definitely listed ones that would make great video games, but I just don't feel like the plot lines maybe would work as well. I think oddly Foundry Side I could see being a video game more and having this city setting, and you have to navigate through the city, and you almost have to like code these objects, and you get certain codes, almost like, I'm so sorry, this reference is going to lose some people, but Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system, and then you have certain things that automatically the characters do. Anyway, so I could kind of see it. I could kind of see both of these, but I'm just not sure. I feel like there are other ones that maybe would work better before these, just like everything else. I'm kind of on repeat here. I would check them out if they made adaptations of these, but I would really want them, I think, to be video games if they were going to make them work. Next up, we have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Let me clarify, this could make a great adaptation. The way that the flight scenes are written in this are so gripping, edge of your seat, action-packed, and I could absolutely see a movie doing that justice really well. I think also it's sci-fi enough that people would enjoy that aspect without feeling overwhelmed, because it's YA, and I feel like it leans younger YA also. But honestly, I'm just kind of being a brat. Sanderson's written a lot of stuff, and I would be annoyed if this got adapted before some of his other ones. That's the only reason, really, I'm putting it on this list, because it would still, I think, actually make a fun adaptation. I feel like these could be movies or video games if you want to have some kind of flight game, but the second book gets a little interesting, and here's my thing. I think you would lose some people. If this were like a TV show or a movie, I think people would really like the first one, and then I think people who don't typically like the more fantastical or interesting, unique aspects, they want that familiarity. I think it would lose some people. It would get a little too out there, and I'm not sure that people would stick with it. Plus, I think to make it look good, it would probably have to be pretty high budget. So I go back and forth. Next up is a story that, as much as I would love for this to be adapted, I just don't know that it's going to get any better than the book. So that would be Sword of Kaigen. The magic in this, I think, would look fantastic in some form of an animated... I actually think it could be an animated movie. I think that would be really great. But there's so much emotional pool to this book, and just seeing the effects of war, seeing the effects of kind of a brainwashed society, I think so much of that is explored so well already in book format. I think that you sit with certain characters and you explore certain relationships, you explore certain emotions that I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil things, but I'm just not sure, even though I think it would be great and I think it would look great. Next up is another one that I would love to have be adapted, but I don't know if it would reach the audience that it would deserve or need to keep going, and that would be First Law by Joe Abercrombie. The reason... Okay, so when people talk about the next Game of Thrones, I actually feel like this one could kind of hit in some ways, because it's not so fantastical that it kind of alienates those who aren't really interested in the super magical type stuff. And I think the characters would really draw people in, but there's a couple of things about this that I think make it so that people maybe wouldn't be as on board. And one of the things is that, in my opinion, part of what makes First Law so interesting and entertaining is that Abercrombie takes your typical fantasy tropes and he's like, let me show you why these tropes are dumb. Not that he literally thinks they're dumb, but I just mean he definitely plays around with some fantasy tropes. And if somebody's not super into fantasy, I feel like maybe, I'm not saying it would go over their head and they're like too dumb to figure it out, but I just think it wouldn't have that same appreciation necessarily. I also think that it's kind of meandering, and I mean, I love this series, but ultimately by the end you're like, what was the point? Which I feel like is the point, that there is no point. I feel like that's kind of a vibe in this story, and that's kind of the grimdark feeling. It's not super hopeful. It doesn't give you hope for the future. It's just kind of like, yeah, everything sucks and everything's gonna keep sucking, so things will change, but the sucking aspect won't change. I feel like that's the vibe in this story, and I'm just not sure that everybody's gonna love that. I think ultimately people want their heroes to root for. I think they want their villains to hate, and it would kind of just be watching a bunch of dudes just go around like being who they are, and then like sometimes they change a little, and then sometimes they revert back to their ways, and I think it's entertaining, but I don't think a lot of other people would necessarily find it entertaining. Next up, I absolutely am kind of stealing this from my friend Alan, because he said this once and I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. And that would be Sunlin Ascends. I'll have Alan's channel linked. He loves this series, but this is a very quirky, eccentric story that follows a man who goes to the Tower of Babel on his honeymoon with his wife, and his wife goes missing, and then he's trying to ascend the tower to find her, and it's weird. And I just feel like Alan pointed out that it would probably end up having the weird factor played up, and we'd have a Tim Burton person, you know, it would feel like a very Tim Burton-like story, and there's more to it than that, but that's the part that they would really do up in an adaptation, and that could be potentially really annoying. And I agree. I actually 100% agree. I think that this in book format, the writing is beautiful, and I don't know that that's going to show up. I mean, obviously, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't feel like the beauty of the writing is going to be appreciated in a show. I think the weird factors, they work alongside the writing, and they're kind of metaphorical, and I feel like they might lose that metaphorical value in a show because then it would just be weird. So, yeah, I think this works best as a book. Next up, we have a book that already people find the book boring, and I say, when I talk about the book almost every time, I'm like, I think it's really good, but I think it's boring. And that would be the Queens of Venice Lear. So this is a King Lear retelling. It's got magic. The magic is strange. It's kind of star prophecy type magic, except for also there's like woodland magic, and I say it's strange because I feel like it's very magical. It's very soft magic. There's not really rules and limitations the way you typically find with something like Sanderson. And so maybe in a way that would be a reason why it could work well in some kind of adaptation. But I mean, this is kind of a character study type of story. And I thought the characters are very nuanced and very interesting, but it's very dramatic and melodramatic. And I think that maybe there is an audience out there who would like this, who kind of like the like little subtle types of characterization or mannerisms of the characters coming to life, but I just don't know. I think what would end up happening to make this work in an adaptation, because it would probably be a TV show or a movie, honestly, I think that they would end up throwing in a lot of nudity and sex scenes, which there's like very minimal of that in this story. There's a lot of people kind of thinking about being with other people, but I think that if they were to do this to kind of to try to not have it be as boring, that they would put that stuff in, because they'd be like, well, everybody likes this. Last up on the list, we have Seven Realms. This is a quartet that I quite enjoyed, and like pretty much everything, I would check out an adaptation if there was one. But this story, it follows two main point of views. One who is an heir to a throne. She's a little bit spoiled. There are other characters in the story as well, but these two main characters, we have her, and we see her change and grow as the story progresses. We see her maybe starting to actually be capable of filling the role that she is meant toward. And then we have another character who's a street thief, who's a little rough around the edges. These two kind of cross paths. And the story is so different from book to book. In the first one, you kind of see these as two totally separate stories in a way, and they barely go together. And in the second one, you see a school setting, and then in the third, it fluctuates so much. And maybe that could be a really good adaptation, because each season would feel very different. But it's kind of, I feel like, just better as a book. I really like seeing their journey, and I like seeing them age throughout the story. Not that they age a lot, but I like just seeing them change over the course of this amount of time. And it's kind of like teenagers becoming adults. It's sort of like what I said about some of the ones at the beginning. It's a little bit of a coming of age story in a way. And I don't know that the magic is interesting enough necessarily for it to be rooted in that and then based off of that in an adaptation, like, oh, look at the video game can be all about this, or the TV show can look really cool with its magic. I don't think that there's enough politics for it to be leaning on its political intrigue. I don't know that it's heavy enough where it's like going to be really deep. I'm just not sure it would make for the greatest adaptation. I would watch it. I would play it if it were a video game, but I like it as a quartet, and I think that that's the best format we're going to get. Let me know, of course, if you feel very differently about any of these, but also if you feel similarly. Let me know other stories that you think maybe wouldn't work as adaptations. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.